So the question to ask yourself about is do I know a system fits me? So what am I trying to accomplish? What's your time frame for trading? What market type are you looking at? What are your beliefs about that market type? What are your beliefs about systems and what they need to do? And what kind of trader are you looking to be? Those are all some of the questions you need to ask to know whether a system fits you. What I want to really get into is what will convince you to trade a system. Does it have to fit your beliefs, or don't you care? What kind of performance criteria are you looking for? Your convincer strategy is what convinces you that the systems work. It doesn't mean you'll decide to trade it. It just means that you are convinced that it works. So we're going to talk about convincer strategies a little bit. And the question is, how do you convince yourself something works? Again, like everything else, it's all made up. So perhaps you're a skeptic and you operate in reverse. And you convince yourself that something doesn't work. And for many of these strategies, it may be a matter of trust. As you answer these questions, think, what does it take for me to trust someone or something? So I'm going to go through a whole series of potential strategies, and I'd like you to make note to whether that strategy fits you. In fact, let's keep track of it. I'll do it here in a small sheet of paper. So if you think this kind of strategy fits you, when we finish talking about it, I'll ask, raise your hands. So a couple of the questions, though. Once you're convinced that it works or doesn't work, do you take a strong stand or a weak stand? So if you're convinced it doesn't work, is it really hard to convince you again that it would work? Or if you're convinced that it works, is it really hard to convince you that it doesn't work? You just keep trading it forever. So strong stand means it's difficult to convince your mind or convince you to change your mind. And a weak stance means you'll easily change your mind. So first one is a hearing convincer strategy. Do you have a hearing convincer strategy? For example, do you need to hear that it works? Someone you trust says it's good. So we're going to talk about System 7. System 7 is really, really good. It's better than all those others. Is that enough to convince you to trade it? Well, if it is, well, notice that. So it might mean you just trust me because I say it. So that's a great system. Is that enough evidence for you? Is that enough evidence for anybody here? For Janie it is. For me saying it, she's willing to try it. And, well, how many times do you have to hear it, or just from me or many, many people? So let's say there's at least 4 other people in here who've traded it, and they all say it's a great system. Would that be enough to convince you? Anybody? Okay, we have one hearing convincer type. So another hearing convincer, you might need to hear the reasons that it works. So someone you trust gives you the reasons. So System 7 works because it has a great SQN, and it works in 4 different market types. So it has an SQN above 4 in 4 different market types. Would that be enough to convince you? So how many would trade it now? You haven't seen the SQN, I've just told you.
No.
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 No, you need more. So one good reason it has a high SQN. No. Maybe two good reasons. I gave it to my wife to trade, and my wife can't trade anything, but she made money trading it. Would that be enough? No. I gave it to my wife to trade, and she taught 5 other women in the neighborhood how to trade using it, and they all made money. No? Anybody would trade it based on that? Okay, well, you're just looking at what it takes to convince you. So, if it take one or many good reasons, how many? So I think we've got one person in the room with a hearing convincer strategy. All right, seeing convincer strategy. So you need to see that it works. What does it mean, see for you? You see it in print. So I see an ad from a newsletter that says, this system has been right on 97 or 98.6% of the trades, and here are 10 different investors who will all testify to how much money they've made. How many would that be enough for to convince you to trade that? Nobody? Strong recommendation. I wrote it down and said, no. Okay, you see some data. You actually see the SQN written out. It says SQN is 5.3 in this system. Would that convince you to trade it? Okay. All right. Now I'm going to show you 20 different trades from this system. And each one I'm going to show you the green arrow where we got in and the red arrow where we got out. And you're going to see that on all 20 trades it made money. Would that be enough to convince you?
I'd try it.
We have Dr. Vest and somebody else would probably like you.
No.
These are the people who go to the shows and they watch. And here's one example after another, and they show, see, here's the green arrow. And then later on, here's the red arrow. And, maybe one example isn't enough, but they'll show you 20. And you don't know what the green arrow or the red arrow means. It's just the system came up with a green arrow and a red arrow. And now you get to buy the software for $3,000 and trade it. So how many of you would be likely to be the type to shell out the $3,000? They're not actually the kind of people who come to my workshops. If I showed you 100 examples, would that be enough? So we got a borderline seer here. Okay, I'm going to show you the SQNs for all 6 market types for this system. Would that be enough to convince you? Anybody? Oh.
Does this have to do with trust? I mean, I took a course with Ken Long, and I trust him a lot because I understand now how he thinks. I've known him for a while, so I might be convinced by seeing something that he did, but I wouldn't, feel the same, hearing the same thing from a stranger. So is this?
Right.
Well, you're hearing it from me.
I thought you were digging.
You're saying it.
You're saying you trust Ken more than me.
But you're saying it in a sarcastic tone of voice.
Yes.
Oh, it's a tone of voice. It's a tone of voice that gets
Not
you.
proper
I've got to
salesman
say it in the
technique.
right way.
It's not proper salesman technique.
I'm not saying it in the right way to get you to believe it. So I have to be. This is real. I'm so excited about this. It's really, really good.
It's
Like,
a secret.
under control.
It's a secret.
Tell everybody else. That's really, really good. Did that convince you? So, if you hear it from Ken and you trust him and you see his data, then you're okay, right?
Yeah, if I understand the rules, I'm probably.
Well, that's the different part.
Okay.
Okay. Another seeing convincer strategy. So I'm going to show you the performance data, 100 R multiples from different trades from each of the 6 market types. Would that be enough to convince you? Nope.
That it worked for the person that was using it, but I don't know who convinced me to use it and rely on it.
Well, we're just finding out what convinces you. And I could show you all that data once, or maybe I could show you that data 10 different times. Or 10 different sets of data. Here's 1,000 data points for one stock, and here's another 1,000 for another stock, and here's 1,000 for another one. Okay, another hearing or seeing convincer strategy. I show you the profit losses from back testing for 1,000 trades. Would that be enough to convince you? Those are trade station printouts or something. Another tryout. Anybody else? The rest of you are skeptics. So again, it's how many times would you see that data? All right, now we go kinesthetic convincer strategy. You have to do it yourself. Okay, you yourself perform back testing. You back test 15 years worth of data. You see great performance from this system. Would that be enough to convince you to trade it?
Yes.
So raise your hand if that's you. Oh, well, we've covered 4 people in this room so far now. Rest of you are hard sells. You don't do it once, you do it for you back tested 15 years of data, and then you back test another 15 years of data. Would that be enough to convince you? Is that anybody else? So you're kind of easy to convince, but skeptical. It's convincing. So you forward test the system in real time. I mean, you're now actually trading it with small position size. Would that be enough to convince you?
Yes.
So I made that add. Aha, we got about 5 more here. We almost got everybody in the room. I think there's 3 who haven't raised their hands yet. So, how many trades, under what conditions would it take for you to move up to full position sizing? Think about that, because that's showing you your convincer strategy. Then there's an auditory digital convincer strategy. In other words, you have to understand it and it makes sense. So you totally understand how a system works. It makes sense to you how it works. Is that enough to convince you? We got one person here who didn't raise his hand before. Who else? Anybody else? Any newcomers? So would you have to go through the logic multiple times or just once? Multiple times. Okay, how many times?
Feel comfortable.
Really good.
Not sure how many that'll be.
Well, one time, two times. Tell
More
me when
than-
you feel
more than two.
comfortable. More than two. Okay. Here's another one. You work out. So we have a couple super traders who've developed a fitness function. They presented that at one of the summits. So in order for a system to work out, if you remember, Dave Walton presented a paper on it called the fitness function. So it not only takes all that other stuff, but it develops it through a logical procedure filter that says if it does this, so you know the system makes sense, and then you take it through the fitness function to decide, so do you need some overall filter then to take it? Not only does it make sense, but you take it through this big special filter that somebody else has developed or you have developed to make it make even more sense. Aha. So maybe taking it through that would help you. I didn't see it added to anybody. So how many heard the fitness function presentation? Did that change your, so if you knew the system logic and you knew it worked through the fitness function, would that be enough to tell you to trade it?
Oh, I trade it.
Well, you're so easy to convince anyway. You already know I can convince you just by telling you. And I'm still telling you.
Tell me when you want me to raise my hand.
Okay. You have a super complex convincer strategy. So you require multiple modalities to be convinced. For example, you'd need to really understand it, back test it or forward test it, take it through a logical procedure like a fitness function, see data suggesting it works, and you might require 4 of those or all of those. Is that you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now I got everybody. So, by the way, just because you're convinced that a strategy works doesn't mean you'll trade it. So, I think Jason wasn't necessarily convinced it would work. He just decided he'd trade it. His strategy was I'd trade it. There's some of you who'd trade a strategy whether you know it works or not. How many of those are you? How many of you are those? You just try it, see what happens. And others might be convinced that it works, but it doesn't fit you, so you won't decide to trade it. So it's another variable. So you could decide that it definitely doesn't fit you, so you won't trade it. So you have to have a decision-making strategy on top of that to decide to trade it. And you could decide it works and that you'll trade it, but you don't feel motivated enough to trade it. So you feel out of sorts and you just don't think, I don't want to trade today. I just don't want to trade because you're not motivated. You got too many other things to do. You want to do your coherence this morning and you want to do laughter yoga, and then you want to walk the dogs and all this other stuff, and you're not really that motivated to trade. So you could be convinced that a strategy works, that it fits you, but you're just not motivated to trade it. So to actually trade, you need to convince yourself it works, decide to actually trade it, and be motivated to trade it, but not necessarily in that order. You could have 2 and 3 without 1. Well, you could be a compulsive gambler type. And then there's other questions that you need to ask yourself. So when you guys who are in the SuperTrader program get to SuperTrader 2, you have to answer all these questions. And I'm trying to get more and more of you to answer them by the time you get to the later lessons. So how would you decide if a system is broken, meaning it stopped working for the market conditions under which it was designed? Probably haven't thought about that one, but you need to know, or you just go randomly and decide suddenly it doesn't work. What if you have multiple systems to trade, but you can only take one trade? How do you decide which system to trade? Or your system gives you a number of signals and you can only take one. How do you decide which one to take? You're making these decisions all the time. It's a good idea to know how you make them, how you run your brain to make them. And those things that I was taking you through are examples of how you decide it. And some of you are going, oh yes, if I do it myself, it's real. If Van tells me about it, it's not real. Or if I see the data, it's not real. If I do it myself, it's real. So it doesn't matter that I took it through 100 trades and it worked and it made a ton of money. You got to take it through 100 trades for you to believe it. I mean, that's just the way your brain works, so it's a good idea to know it. So questions on this topic? But that's good. I think everybody raised their hand at some point, with Jose having the most complex.
I do have a question. So on this, so this is important to know how you make your decisions, right? Because I guess if you're looking to develop a system, then of course, if somebody just tells you that it's a system and it works, then you can just go out and find one and use it, and you'll trade it. And if you're somebody who's got a super complex convincer strategy, it's a lot more work. So I guess the point of this is
And
that
some of you might never trade it. Some people might never trade it because it never meets the convincer strategy. They're always being a perfectionist and it never meets it.
which I presume would be a psychological issue.
Yes. It's all psychological issues.
But I guess what I'm
I
trying
mean,
to
some of you have convincer strategies that might not be too useful.
So is that the point of this exercise then, for us to think about how useful our beliefs around being convinced are?
You have various strategies that run your brain, and the point of it is to show you something about, how you run your brain. It's all made up. You make it all up, and you see. So a lot of you were kinesthetic, so you get some warm and fuzzy feeling in your tummy or in your chest, and suddenly you're willing to trade it. I mean, literally, that's the way it works. So you might as well at least know what it is. It's more useful to know it. So, are you so complex you'll never trade? So we talked about, I didn't talk about it here, but there's big picture people who are intuitors, and there are sensors who are very detailed and they need lots of facts. And the sensors are much more likely to, if you show them 100 trades, they trade it. That's enough. 100 green and red arrows on a trade, they would trade that. The sensors are much more likely to trade somebody else's systems. Ands probably have to fiddle with it and make it theirs in some way. So most of our super traders are NTJs, or some good share of them anyway. And so what happens, we teach a system and they've got to fiddle with it till it becomes such one that they'd be convinced to trade.